Welcome to Arizona Bill Watch, the show where you get satisfaction if you're not getting it from your state legislators. We report and comment on what happens at the state legislature and alert you on what is coming up next. And now, Arizona Bill Watch.
Hello everyone, welcome to Arizona Bill Watch for another lively discussion of important and controversial bills. I am your host, Jose Borrajero. Thank you for watching. There's a lot going on at the Capitol these days, so stay tuned because we have a fantastic show for you today. But before we do that, some housekeeping items. Number one, we would like for you to watch the whole show from beginning to end. However, you may fast forward to the bills of your choice by following the chart that we have placed down below. Secondly, if you like what you see, we really would like you to like the show, share, and subscribe. Thirdly, it costs money to do what we do. So if you like to contribute, you can go to my website, azpeopleslobbyist.com. So with all that out of the way, let's go to our first bill. House Bill HB 2474, short title, School Immunizations Exclusions. This bill is scheduled to be heard in the House and Human Services Committee, and it's going to be there on Monday the 30th. It was introduced by Representative Montenegro. It's a very simple bill. I think it's only about one line, or two maybe, and all it does is it says that you cannot force vaccinations of students in the school as a condition of attending school. You cannot require that they use a vaccine that is an emergency administration use authorization. What that means is that these experimental, just like the COVID vaccine, it's still an experimental thing. You cannot require that the student would have that kind of immunization. It makes a lot of sense. In my opinion, children should not be required to be injected with some kind of experimental chemical just to satisfy some bureaucrat's idea of what's good or bad. So, I am a yes on this. How about you, Archie?
Yeah, I'm up on the air about it. It has some good things about it, but it has some bad things about it. And one of the bad things about it is that it's really it's infringing upon a parent's Bill of Rights. And when you infringe upon the parent's Bill of Rights, then in my opinion, you got a real problem.
You mean it doesn't say that unless it is approved by the parent?
Well, no. This is saying what the director of the Board of Education can do. It has nothing in here about what the parents have control over their children. That's set forth in the parents' Bill of Rights, and that's not mentioned here anyway.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But there's a whole list of exclusions as to the kind of vaccine that can be required. All these doses add one more to that list. So if the parents' Bill of Rights was being infringed upon before, in other words, if it's going to be infringed upon now, it was already being infringed upon before. So nothing changes.
So what? I mean, get rid of the bill entirely.
Yeah, but that doesn't change the previous infringement.
If you don't have this bill telling you what the Board of Education can and cannot do, then you're not infringing upon the parents' Bill of Rights.
Archie, they already do that. The only thing that they have added is look at the bill. They have added one line to the bill.
No, two lines.
Well, two lines.
Yeah.
They have 2 lines, but the rest of the bill is not changed. You know
well,
that.
I understand, but I mean, it's the wording of those 2 lines that they've added there. It can be any bill that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and anybody else comes along and says, hey, you need to get this vaccine. No, that's infringing on the parents' right. My idea, I mean, that's,
The only thing that this bill adds, it's that 1 or 2 lines, depending on your screen, and that line simply says, it simply adds this kind of immunization to the list that it's already there. Nothing else is changed by the bill. Only that little blue text is it's what's going to be changed.
And that little blue text is...
And it does not say anything one way or the other about parents' bills of right or anything else, because all it is it adds to the list of what was already there.
I understand.
So, in other words, this is another poorly written bill because it is still, as you said, Archie, it still does not say that they can or cannot require.
No, folks. No, folks. No.
This is an exemption. This is an exemption to what the director of the Board of Education can do.
People, you know better. The only thing that this bill does is adds one more line
Right.
to what was there already.
That's true.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. So the only thing that you can judge when you're judging this bill is that one line. And that line mentions absolutely nothing
And I
other
agree with
than
that.
add one more line to the list of immunizations that cannot be used.
And I agree with that.
So if you don't like the bill, then you can say, well, we should repeal the bill, or we should adjust the bill, or whatever. But that is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is this particular bill, 2474, that's all it does. So
Okay.
with that, we'll agree to disagree.
Okay.
And with that, I'm for the bill.
Yeah, well, me too. Senate Bill SB 1095, early ballot envelope notice. This bill is going to be heard in the Senate Elections Committee on Monday, the 30th. It was introduced by Senator Carroll. And again, this is a very simple bill. All it says is that it's actually a notice to voters that if they do not have their ballot in by the Friday before the election, that it's going to result in a delay in the results of the election. It's a good bill, I suppose.
And I'm just going to put my 2 cents in right now. What I don't agree with is essentially yes, but it just doesn't go far enough because, in my opinion, if they're not there by a certain point, then you lose out. We're hand holding again. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, they're saying here that it can still be counted. Just it'll delay the election, and that shouldn't be, in my opinion.
Yeah, basically what you're saying is that if the bill's there late, you're still going to be counted late, and it's going to delay the election. And you're saying that if it's not there by the proper time, you're out of luck.
Correct, and nobody's being
Well,
held accountable.
I agree with that. That's why I'm giving this a question mark. I'm saying, I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other because it doesn't go far enough, and so on and so forth. So it's not a bad bill. It's just that it doesn't do that much good. Therefore, I'm not taking a strong position on it.
And my strong position on this is no. Go ahead.
Well, my position is a decided no. And the reason my position is a decided no is if you read, says failure to mail an early ballot or deposit an early ballot in a ballot drop box by the Friday before the election will result in delayed
Correct.
election results. Now, there are other bills out here dealing with the same subject matter, and those other bills say if you don't have it in, your ballot just simply won't be counted. So now, which are we going to follow? The one that won't be counted or the one that's just going to delay the count of the election? All right, we got an inconsistency here, and then we got a real problem coming the next election of which one of these sections control, which means we're going to have to file a lawsuit and have a judge make a determination. The judge is going to say, it's not up to me, it's up to you guys to correct your own mistakes. Do it. All right? This is just another mistake where people are not talking to each other and they're putting in inconsistent bills. This is a bad bill.
And I agree.
Yeah, well, the one thing about that point is that we have bills that contradict each other, and that has been happening not just this session but many sessions before. How do we resolve that? I don't see how we could, not with the kind of people that we have at the legislature. So I leave it up to people. If you think that it's a good idea to have this thing on there, whether that's fine. And again, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other.
Well,
But
I
the consensus is it's a no, so let's go with a no. Early ballots, election day, tabulation. This bill will be heard in the Senate Elections Committee on Monday, the 30th. It was introduced by Senator Carroll. And the main thing that this bill does is that it changes the wording of the statute from may to shall when it comes to the requirement that early ballots brought to a voting location be tabulated the same day. Up to now, it read it may, so now they substitute shall. And according to most, if not all legislators, shall means must, which is totally wrong. Totally wrong. We've had this discussion before because it happens so often. And the thing about it is that if you go to Webster's dictionary, the regular dictionary, shall and must are pretty much synonymous. But if you go to any law dictionary, the way that is interpreted in the court of law, the way that lawyers interpret it, and so on, may, that is, shall is not, it's not must.
Not
Shall
mandatory. It's not mandatory.
Shall is may, is not must. So if you really want to make it mandatory, you have to say must. But for some reason, the Arizona State Legislature has a problem with that word must. To them, it's a four-letter word, I guess.
Well, it seems to me like Ledge Council should be giving them some advice on this, but they're not. We've discussed this before.
Yeah, the Ledge Council is not the most. Well, let's not get into that.
And I have to say this.
Other than that, this is just basically a housekeeping bill.
Right, and I will say I looked up in the law dictionary, and it says that shall, generally speaking, means, I'm going to use the word must, but it doesn't use that word but it is still up to interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, so. Anyway.
So
It's not mandatory.
It's not mandatory.
So why use language that is subject to interpretation?
Exactly.
Because you want somebody to have to go file a lawsuit.
That's right.
Well, that could be the reason.
That is the reason.
Because these Ledge Council, they're all lawyers.
Right.
Senate Bill 1135, short title, Spoiled Early Ballots, Election Day. And this bill would be in the Senate Elections Committee, and it will be Monday the 30th. It was introduced by Senator Kavanaugh. And this bill does a lot of things. However, the main part of it, the really significant portion of it, is that it repeals the Board of Supervisors' power to allow county recorder to establish emergency voting centers. And I am totally in agreement with that. We know what happened with Fontes when he created these voting centers, emergency voting centers, for no particular reason, just to put them in an area that would favor the Democrats. Yeah. So to me, that's a solid yes. So, Archie?
You want to hear from me on this?
I do.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is a 13-page bill that really needs to be sent back to the author and have him read this bill, or her, or whatever it is, Senator Kavanaugh. Yeah, have Senator Kavanaugh read this bill and try to make sense out of it himself. What Jose says, that it does do away with the emergency voting centers. Well, in one paragraph it does, but in another paragraph it don't. It permits it. So you got a conflict of interest within this bill. Not only that, you have a conflict with other bills about voting centers. So this one says you can't have emergency voting centers, but 1141 says yes, you can, and this one in another paragraph says yes, you can have emergency voting centers. So, I mean, it's an inconsistent bill. It makes absolutely no sense. It goes on further to say that under certain circumstances, an early voter will lose their right to be on the early voting list. But then in another position it says, well, but wait a minute, they get to be on the early voting list, even though they violated the provisions of this bill. I mean, it's a totally bad bill. It's poorly written, and it needs to go back to Mr. Kavanaugh and have Mr. Kavanaugh rewrite this bill or pull it away entirely, just withdraw the bill in its entirety. It's just too confusing.
And I agree with you. And that was when I was reading this, that was the problem I was having. Wait, on this hand it's saying this, but then on this hand it's saying this. There's absolutely no consistency, which is seeming with all these voting bills. There's just no consistency.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The only part that I really liked about it was the one that it would repeal the Board of Supervisors' power to have to allow the county recorder to have these emergency voting centers. But actually, even the short title of the bill doesn't even reflect that. The short title of the bill says "Spoil early ballots election day." And it doesn't even do that so well anyway. So it is a bad bill, but I do like the idea of somewhere there that you can have a prohibition of these emergency centers.
Well, and in my opinion, that's the other problem I have, is that why do we have emergency voting centers? We know how Fontes used it. If you have that in a bill, regardless of how you say it, there's always going to be somebody who's going to find a way to get around it. And that's why I don't even agree with emergency voting centers.
Well, and that's why that's the good part of this bill, because it does eliminate that.
On one hand.
Yeah, well, it's a bad bill, just like so many of them are bad.
Yeah.
Senate Bill SB 1141. Short title: Early Ballot Drop-Off Identification. This bill is going to be in the Senate Elections Committee on Monday the 30th. It was introduced by Senator Hoffman. And again, this is one of those easy bills. It's very short. All it says is that if you bring a ballot to a voting facility, then you have to show ID. Very simple. If you bring somebody else's ballot, not only do you have to show your ID, but you have to show that you're entitled to bring that ballot as a result of being a member of your family or a caretaker. It's a good bill. I like it. I don't see how it will be anything wrong with it.
You going to speak now?
No, you can go first because I want to hear your opinion.
Well.
I know your opinion probably, but go ahead.
No, this is a terrible bill. Terrible bill. There's so much inconsistencies in it. First of all, it's inconsistent with the prior bill that we talked about on 1135 about the voting centers. This one clearly allows emergency voting centers, but this one goes on and it's inconsistent with a couple of other bills. And even under 1135, it says that if you drop off your early ballot at a voting center, then you lose your right to be on the early voting list.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, now we got one bill that says you can be on the voting list. Now we got one that says you can't.
I think it's 2 consecutive, they said in here.
But then,
regardless, it's still.
Well, but this one goes on and says, well, I mean, you can have somebody else drop off your bill. All right, but then there's another bill that's pending that says if you have in your possession a voted or an unvoted ballot, you're guilty of a felony. All right? Now, am I going to want to carry your ballot to the voting place and be guilty of a felony?
No, of course you wouldn't want to carry Anita's.
No.
Because the bill very clearly says that you can carry the ballot if it is a member of your family or if you're caretaker for that person.
There's a bill that specifically excludes them. There is a
We
bill.
can discuss that bill. Let's talk about this bill.
Well, okay,
And
but
that's what
I
this bill
can't
does.
talk about this bill, Jose, if it's in conflict with another bill. I just can't do that because, I mean, you're creating a conflict here, and there's no reason for them to be creating a conflict, and that's all they're doing.
And I agree with that. And and also to add to that, I do not believe, and why I have a problem with all of this is because I don't like the whole that you can bring your ballot for somebody else. Don't like it. I don't care if you have ID, whatever. You can have anybody can get by the system.
Well, there's a bill that specifically precludes a spouse, a child, a sibling, a caregiver, and all of those from being able to carry your ballot and drop it off. They're specifically excluded, and they're specifically provided that they're guilty of, I think it's a...
But if you don't like that bill, when that bill is in the legislature, when it is scheduled for a committee hearing, and then it comes up discussion here, you can say, I don't like this bill because it's inconsistent with another bill. Right now, we're talking about this one bill, what it does.
I understand that.
And
Jose.
we should limit our discussion to what is in the bill.
I disagree with you, Jose. I mean, you can't say, well, this bill is totally exempt from other provisions of the law. I mean, it's not exempt from other provisions of the law.
But that's not the case. So anyway, we agreed to disagree on this. You don't like it. Archie doesn't like it. I like it. So. Senate Bill SB 1144, short title, Electronic Ballot Adjudication Prohibition. This bill will be heard in the Senate Elections Committee on Monday the 30th. It was introduced by Senator Huffman, and it very simply says that you cannot use electronic machines for adjudication of ballots. Now, I think I know what Arch is going to say about this, and I agree with what I think is going to say, because we should not have this kind of adjudication in the first place. If the ballot is wrong, if it doesn't meet the criteria, there's no reason in the world why we should sit over there and try to guess as to what the voter intended. Having said that, situation being the way it is, we are still going to have these kinds of adjudications, and that in that case, this bill makes sense because it prohibits the use of the machine to do that. So that's my opinion on it. But what do you think, Gloria?
I think that, and I agree with that, machines should not be making that determination, and especially because and even in this last election, they used the Sharpies, which was an example. They have a tendency to not read in the tabulators right. So I agree with this bill.
You agree with this bill?
I agree with, yes. But go ahead.
Oh, okay.
You may change my mind.
That's good for you to agree with it. Nothing
I don't
wrong
think
with
we
that,
should be using electronic equipment to determine what somebody was thinking.
Well, electronic equipment is not determining under this bill, or not determining what people are doing. But you see, the problem with it is, if you have a bill under this, if you have a ballot under this bill, and the machine or the voters of it can't determine exactly what it is that the voter intended for whatever reason, and it won't go through the machine, then they get to make a whole new ballot for them. So you get to vote for me. How about that? You know, nothing greater than that.
And I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
And that's why I said that I don't like the fact that we have adjudication and we can guess as to what the voter wanted. But as long as we do not prohibit that, as long as that is still allowed, then this bill makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose.
He agrees with us.
You're putting words in my mouth.
I know, it ain't sanitary, but I still do it. Senate Bill SB 1170, ballot drop boxes, prohibition. It will be in the Senate Elections Committee on Monday the 30th, introduced by Senator Huffman. And it says very simply that notwithstanding any other law, I hate it when a bill starts out by saying notwithstanding any other law. I mean, that is usually a red flag, okay? So, notwithstanding any other law, a county recorder or other officer in charge of elections may not use an unmonitored drop box for receipt of voted ballots, and there's some exceptions. There shouldn't be any drop boxes to begin with, period, end of sentence, okay? If we are going to have drop boxes, then this bill makes some sense because it says it cannot be unmonitored unless it is within the government building, which is watched and so on and so forth. So as far as it goes, this is a good bill, in my humble opinion.
I assume Gloria is going to comment.
No,
Gloria,
go
what?
right ahead. Go ahead.
No, I want you to go first.
No,
I
go.
want to have the final
I
word.
know you do. I do not agree with any. No, I'm going to say no on this one. I do not agree with the drop boxes. You can never monitor anything consistently. So, in my opinion, this is a no. I just don't agree with. I don't agree with the whole premise of it anyway.
Well, I mean, I think the bill, as long as it relates to, non-supervised drop boxes, I think that makes sense. But then they go on with the exclusions, and all of the exclusions are monitored drop boxes. So, I mean, what's the point of having the exclusions if they're monitored and you're trying to prevent people from having a non-monitored drop box? So there's about 3 or 4 paragraphs that probably need to be just deleted and leave the one about no unmonitored drop box, and it would probably be okay.
Okay, so we have partial agreement from Archie, partial agreement from Gloria, and full agreement from me.
Okay.
Bill SB 1063, short title, Food Municipal Tax Exemption. And this bill is going to be in the Senate Finance Committee on Monday the 30th. It was introduced by Senator Borelli. And what it does, it's a very simple bill in a sense, because it just, all it does is it adds to the list of items that are exempt from sales tax to food that's intended for home consumption. It does nothing in regard to restaurants or anything else, just the food that you buy at Fry's or Safeway or whatever. Since there are so many exceptions, all this does is just add one more exemption. There's some good reasons for approving this bill, and I've gone back and forth on it. As of now, reading the bill and looking at and listening to the discussions that I've heard elsewhere, actually it makes sense to have this bill. For one thing, it should be the whole state should be uniform. The way it is now, municipalities are allowed to have this tax. Some do, some don't. It should be even, and they should stick to the principle that we don't want to tax. There's 2 things that should not ever be taxed because they're so important to the people, and one is the food for home consumption, and the other one is rental of, in other words, where you live and what you eat. The food and shelter are essential, so they really should not be taxed. And there's many other ways that municipalities can make money, and actually do, including the share of the sales tax that the state does with all the municipalities and so on. So they do get money from the state to alleviate any shortage that may occur as a result of not taxing the food. So.
I was confused by this bill, so I'm curious to know what you say, Archie.
Oh, well, I think this is a no. And the reason I think this is a no is just for the reason that Jose said. The state taxes it, so they don't want any competition from the cities. Just let us do the taxing of it.
No,
if you're going to get rid of the taxing,
that's not what I said, and that's not what happened.
I understand, but you said that the state taxes it, and they do.
No. The state does not tax food for home consumption.
I'm going to have to go talk to my grocery store about that.
I know, that's what I don't understand. Yeah.
No, the state does not tax that. That's an exception. The only people
then
that
who
can put a
taxes
tax
it? Because whenever I get a big bill at the bottom of it says this is how much tax you paid.
That is a town tax. The municipality imposes that tax.
But it says sales tax on it.
That's what it is.
No, we don't have sales tax. You have a transaction privilege.
well,
But
yeah.
no,
But in the event, look, the state should not be telling the city what they can and what they cannot do. I disagree with this.
They do it all the time.
I understand.
The cities are subdivisions of the counties, and cities are subdivisions of the state. The state is not a federal republic. You have subdivisions of cities, municipalities, and counties. They all have to stick to the state law.
I understand.
When you said what you were saying about the living, then the living applies for people who have rentals.
Well, this bill is only with the food tax.
Right,
There's another bill dealing with rentals, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Right, okay.
I only,
this one just confused me.
Yeah, I only use that as an illustration.
Okay.
That shelter and food should not be taxed.
Okay, and I agree with that.
Senate Bill SB 1172, Fire District Bonding Limitation. This bill is going to be in the Senate Finance Committee on Monday the 30th. It was introduced by Senator Mesnard, and the main provision of this bill, well, it actually does two things. Number one, it makes it more transparent so that people know what they're getting into when they are voting in favor of imposing a tax via a fire district. And the second thing that it does is that it imposes certain limits, so you cannot go. There are limits now, but regularly these fire districts go above the limit, and there is no provision to prevent that, and this bill would do that. My only concern about this bill is that it deals only with fire districts. It should deal with every taxing district, because if you look at your property tax statement that comes out every year, and you look at where your tax is going and who's taxing and so on, you can see the list of taxing districts that have taxing authority. They're not a government agency as such, but they have taxing authority. And there's school taxing authorities, there's fire district taxing authority, all kinds of taxing authorities. This should apply to all of them, not just fire. So it doesn't go far enough, but I like the bill as it is. Just it doesn't go far enough.
And I agree.
Well, I think it's an okay bill.
Yeah, this one.
Mm-hmm. Wait a second. Did I hear that right?
I know.
You mean Archie agrees with both of us?
I make a mistake every once in a while.
Okay.
Not often.
No, but this one, I think, yeah, we're all in agreement on this one, and so this would be a yes.
House Bill HB 2472. Short title: Social Credit Use Prohibition. This bill is going to be heard in the House Committee, House Commerce Committee, on Tuesday, the 31st. It was introduced by Representative Montenegro, and actually, this is a good bill. I like this. We really should not need this bill, but apparently we do. There's such thing as, let's see, what's the term that they use here? Social credit, which some banks apparently are using or being allowed to use when determining who gets credit or how much credit and so on from a bank. I was not aware of the fact that they could do this. I thought that discrimination was illegal. But now you have a situation where a bank, if they choose to do so, no, let me rephrase that. The way that the law is written is that the state may not require that they do this, which is a different situation. That the state may not require to do this, and states have been required to do this on certain occasions because they want to advance this type of agenda. You know, where a person, if it's black or if it's Hispanic or something, then it's more worthy of the credit or treated differently and so on. Everybody should be treated the same. In my opinion, the only two considerations for a loan is can the person repay the bill? Does he have the ability to repay the bill? And look at the record. Does he have the income to do it, and a history of paying bills, not any of this social credit. So that's my opinion.
I'm curious, what is a social credit score? I don't even know. So
Well, I mean, near as I can tell, I mean, everybody has a social credit score. Everybody has a credit score. And you go, I mean, you got 3 or 4 different credit statements. I mean, you got Experian, you got all of those.
right.
No,
yeah.
but those
that's what I'm not understanding.
Those are not social, though.
But what does social credit score mean?
That now they don't define it in the bill.
Well, that's the problem.
Yeah, I know that's a problem. It's a problem that they don't define what social. Apparently, they think everybody knows what it is.
I have never heard of a social credit score, and I am totally against this because if somebody's going to go and try to get a house or whatever this is applying to, they're setting themselves up for a risk for not getting repaid. And I don't know what the difference between a social credit score is and a credit score, but I'm against this.
So you think that the state could require banks to use social credit in evaluating?
But I think social needs to be defined because a credit score is a credit score to me. You have your 3, you have your Experian, now I can't think of them all, TransUnion and the other one, and when somebody goes to get a loan, and this, when I did a little more research on this seems to go back to the firearm thing. And in that regard, if that's what they're referring to purchasing a firearm, so if that's what they're referring to, then that's what they need to address.
Here's the thing.
That's what I found.
What's been happening, and I was not aware that states allowed it or that they approved it or supported it, but it has come to my attention that quite often a bank will not make a loan to a business if that business is involved in the sale or manufacture of firearms,
right? Because
they're opposed to firearms. What this bill does, and when I first read it, I thought it said it prohibits that action. It actually does not prohibit the action. It just says the state cannot
require them to apply it. Yeah.
Which is a very weak type of situation. And in that sense, I don't like it. But folks, this happens all the time. You have a bill that does something good, but it's not enough. And many times in order to pass a bill, you have to take just a little bit and then later add a little bit more and a little bit more until the law becomes what you want it to be. But because of political considerations, because of the way that the legislature is composed, because of who's the governor, for many reasons, a lot of times you cannot get what you want. You have to just take a little bit. Here, I see that kind of situation where we can take a little bit, even though it's not a perfect bill.
Archie?
You don't want to hear me on
yes,
this
I do.
Okay, so then let's not hear him on it.
Okay. This is a prime example of why we need an initiative that limits the number of bills that a legislator can introduce to no more than 5. Right? At that point in time, if they're limited to only being able to introduce 5 bills, they're going to start paying attention to what they're and there'll be some meat on the bills, and they'll have some relevance. This one has no relevance to anything at all.
And until that happens, folks, we have, as of now, we already have 900 and some bills introduced.
900 and some bills
which is ridiculous.
Which is ridiculous. We are all in agreement with that. Okay? If I could wave a magic wand and say that every legislature can produce only or introduce only 5 bills, I would do it in a minute. And until that happens, we have to deal with what we have. And this is what we have. And if we're going to be dealing with these bills, okay, well, let's do it, because it is one step in the right direction.
And that I totally disagree with.
You disagree
So
with that?
I disagree with, well, I disagree, that this is a no for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'll make this comment. I've read a number of the Senate bills, and so far I have read every House bill that's been introduced, but I'm way behind. But let me tell you, folks, if you get busy and you start reading those bills, you're going to realize just how dumb some of those bills really are. There's no reason for them at all. They accomplish nothing, and all they do is create confusion. And you know, that's a matter that we need to deal with our legislators. You need to talk to the people in your legislative district and say, what are you doing? Stop this. It's totally, and some really good legislators are introducing some really, really dumb bills. And we need to limit the number of bills they introduce. We really do.
This goes to what I said from the very beginning of all of this, however many shows ago, that to me, they just do this to keep themselves busy.
Well, not only to keep themselves busy, they do this to make a statement so that they can go back to their constituents and say, this is what we're doing and this is why you should vote for me. But see, we have to make the distinction between what should be a perfect situation and what we have to work with. It's that simple. I mean, if I like a ribeye steak, of course I would go for a ribeye steak, but what if I have only hamburger in front of me? Am I going to go hungry, or am I going to have the hamburger?
I'll go next door and eat ribeye steak.
Say what?
I'll go next door and eat ribeye steak.
Fine, we can go to New Mexico and see what it's like, or we can go to California and see what it's like, and see if you like that. Folks, it's not perfect. We have to deal with what we have. We have 900 bills, probably 800 of which are worthless. But they're there, so if we're going to deal with bills, we have to deal with them and express an opinion one way or the other. And in this case, I think this is a step in the right direction.
You and I are not here calling them out. They may never know that there's people watching them.
Yeah, well, we are calling them out.
I know.
We're doing that.
That's why you and I sometimes disagree.
Well, no, I agree with calling them out. I'm just saying that you have to deal with what you got.
Yeah.
So with that, we have disagreement again, but that's okay.
I'm the medium, the happy medium. Go ahead.
House Bill HB 2458, Race, Ethnicity, Prohibited Instruction. This bill is going to be in the House Education Committee on Tuesday, the 31st. It was introduced by Representative Pingarelli, and basically what it does is that it prevents schools from providing instruction that judges individuals according to their race or ethnic background, among other things. This bill has a list of about 10 things that you cannot do in regards to school instruction. To me, this is an excellent bill. We've dealt with this before. There has been bills that have been passed. There has been schools that violate it. There have been, especially down in Tucson, Pima County, there have been legislation. There has been court cases. This has been going on back and forth for many years. We should settle this once and for all and have a bill that absolutely prohibits this type of behavior. And I am 100% in favor of this bill.
This is basically what it is the CRT.
Right.
And
but it goes beyond CRT.
Right. And reading this bill, I agree with it, because if it is prohibiting, as you said, the 10 points that it's prohibiting, which I can't think about, the race and so on and so forth, and judging people and so on and so forth, I agree with this bill. Because if it takes care of CRT, then probably won't, because as the video came out that said there's more than one way to skin a cat. But this at least takes a step in the right direction.
Okay. In my opinion, this bill is wrong in so many different ways that it's almost impossible to come to grips with it. The schools have no business teaching morality. That belongs in the church, and it belongs at home.
That's right.
And for this bill now to start bringing race and morality into our school system is just not right.
Wait a second.
But it's saying it's not.
Wait a second. You agree with me then, because what the bill does is that it prohibits that sort of behavior.
Jose, you know that any teenage kids, whenever you tell them you can't do something, that's exactly what they're going to do. And the same applies to a school teacher. When you tell them they can't do something, they're going to find a way around it, and they're going to do it.
Which is why I say
leave it up to me as the parent of my child to sue that teacher or to sue the school district. We don't need this bill. But just know we're introducing race into the question of the school and morality, and it does not belong there. It belongs at the church, and it belongs at home.
You're right. It doesn't belong in the school, and that's what this says, because they're dealing with what's going on. What the schools are doing is they are doing the CRT, and they're doing the race and all that, and they're saying we prohibit that sort of behavior.
Right. So
you're reading the bill wrong if you think that this thing is going to encourage that behavior.
No, I'm not reading the bill wrong. I understand what you're saying, and I have told you that it doesn't belong in school. It belongs in church, and it belongs at home.
Why is this bill bad?
And the bill says it doesn't belong in the school.
Then why are we even bringing it up?
Because it needs to be, because it's happening, and it needs to be brought up, and it needs to be prohibited.
Okay.
And there has to be penalty for doing it.
Well, there's already a penalty. Why do we need this?
There is no penalty.
There
because
is
it's
a penalty.
Because
I mean, it's in
being
the
taught.
Parents' Bill of Rights. It's in the Parents' Bill of Rights. We don't need this. I mean, we're having a bill here that
this is not in the Parents' Bill of Rights.
You need to go back and read the Parents' Bill of
Oh,
Rights.
I've read it many times.
Well,
601 and 602, both of them. And
right.
it doesn't it mentions nothing about race. It mentions anything about ethnicity.
No, but it also mentions that a parent has the right to control what is taught to their child. Right? It does.
And if,
so go ahead.
And if a school does that wrong, then you have to react somehow, and you have to make it so that they don't do it. And this bill does exactly that. So this is one in which I have no intention of changing my position. I'm 100% in favor of it.
Me too.
Period. End of sentence.
I have no intention of changing my position. I think it's a totally bad bill.
Okay.
It's totally unnecessary.
2-1, folks. House Bill HCR 2001, School District Expenditure Authorization. This bill is going to be in the House Education Committee on Tuesday, the 31st. It was introduced by Representative Cook, and what it does is it authorizes a 1-year increase in the school expenditure. It's called the school aggregate expenditure limitation. And on the face of it, in my personal opinion, this is a terrible thing to do. A terrible thing to do. Let me explain. The Arizona Constitution back in 1980, the voters put in a limitation on the amount of money that can be spent by the schools. Now, that limitation, they wisely realized that inflation would have an effect, and the number of students will have an effect on what should be spent. So they put those two provisions. The limitation, the limit may be increased every year according to the rate of inflation and according to how many students there are. In addition to that, they had another provision that on top of all that, you can have an automatic increase of 10%. So not only do you account for the number of students, you account for inflation, and then you add another 10% whether you need it or not. Now, what's wrong with that? Nothing is wrong with that. Now, here we have 2019, 2020, 21, 22, and we have all of these appropriations for schools. The 2020, 20 for 2020, all of these gigantic increases in funding that we had have had the effect of having the schools have the money that is above what the limit is. So guess what? The Constitution prohibits them from spending that money. But the Constitution also has a provision that the legislature, by a 2/3 vote of both chambers, can increase or can waive that restriction. So right now we have $1.4 billion that are going to be added to the limit so that the schools can spend all that money. So again, it's a bad idea, it's a bad bill, but there's more to it than that. This bill is going to pass handily. It's a foregone conclusion that it will pass handily. Every Democrat would vote in favor of it, and it takes then you need 40 in the House, so it takes there's 29. Then you have 11. You need 11 Republicans to vote for it. They do have to vote. Now, we don't like the bill. I don't like the bill. If I were able to convince 10 Republicans to vote against it, then that bill would fail. The chances of us being able to convince 10 Republicans to vote against it are nil. There's another consideration, and that is that come election time, 2024, if this limit is not exceeded, if the Republicans actually vote against it and prohibit it, then the schools are going to be, and the school cabal and all of these people are going to be crying bloody murder as they have in the past. With the situation where we have only one Republican advantage in the House and one in the Senate, we are in tremendous danger of losing that majority. Mm-hmm. So we have to make decisions based on politics, as much as I hate it. So, with all that said, I'm in favor of this bill. For those reasons. It has nothing to do with the merit, and as a matter of fact, the merit is worthless. But you have to look at politics, you have to look at the whole picture. You have to get elected in order to make change. If we could have 5 or 6 members, majority, in each chamber, okay, then we'll be looking at a different situation. But right now, the way it is, it doesn't make sense to go against this provision. So, you have an
Is it up to me again?
Well, no, either one of you.
Politically, I understand that. I'm against the bill. Again, it's what the Democrats and the Republicans both do. They just spend. Nobody's being held accountable. What's the point of even having a limit anymore? That's all we do. And so politically, I understand where you're coming from. I'm against the bill, though. So in my opinion, it's a no. It's I don't know. I guess it's a no-win situation.
Of course, it's a no-win situation. That's why I explain my vote. I explain why I think that we should encourage people to vote yes on this. It's just a political situation. Now, if we could get away with it, it would be now. I don't know how many of you people listened or watched there was a hearing, a joint hearing of both the Appropriations Committee, and that happened yesterday. As a matter of fact, yesterday at 10:30, and I watched this hearing, and nobody in a position, nobody in the government came up with a long-term solution. They all just said, yeah, we appropriated the money, let them spend it. And there was nobody opposed that, and I understand why, and I agree with that. But nobody came up with a long-term solution except for one individual who is not part of the government. Okay. Two solutions to that problem. One is that you change the base year from 1980 to 2003. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense except for one thing, and that is that things have changed a lot since then. Number two is that you have the limit be established at the time that the budget is being created. What happens here is that we create the budget, we give all that money to the school, and then come March of the following year, they say, oh, here is the limit. If we don't do this, we're going to have to close schools, etc. And they have an excellent argument for the people. Now, I'm not talking about you and I who know what's going on. We're talking about the people out there who are going to be voting. See, that's the problem. So again, those two solutions are, would go a long ways to alleviate this, but nobody in the government is doing it. So anyway, that's the reason why I have the position that I have. Archie, you had to say something.
Well, mine's not as sophisticated as yours, Jose, but...
It's not sophisticated, it's just based on facts.
Oh, okay. Well, if I recall, last year, the total budget that the state had was somewhere between 11 and 12 billion dollars. Now, if you read this bill, and folks, if there was ever a bill for you to call your legislator, and I'm not talking about request to speak, I'm talking about pick up the phone, call your legislator, and tell them in no uncertain terms that you won't vote for them again if they vote to pass this. Now, let me give you why. As I said, last year the budget was somewhere between 11 and 12 billion dollars. Now, if you read this bill, it provides that every school district in the state can exceed their budget by $1.4 billion. And there is somewhere between 300 and 600 school districts in this state. That means that if they all exceed that, even just by $1 billion, then we're talking about somewhere between 300 and 600 billion dollars in over expenditures that you as a taxpayer are going to have to make up somewhere, somehow.
That's not correct, Archie. That's not true. It's bad enough the way it is, okay? The 1.5 billion is the aggregate. It's the whole school system, not each individual school.
You need to reread the bill again, Jose.
No, well,
it says each school district.
I've read the bill. I've listened to the committee hearing. Mm-hmm. It's the aggregate. Aggregate means the whole.
I understand, Jose, but if you read the bill, it says each and every school district can do this. They can exceed their budget by $1.4 billion.
No, what happens is the legislature can exceed the limit by voting 2/3, not the schools.
They're going to approve it this year, right?
And it's 1 year only.
Okay, well, that means this year that if there's 400 school districts, that means that we're going to be $400 billion over their budget, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, fine. If that's what you think, that's okay. You're wrong, so we have to agree or to disagree.
Well.
Anyway, folks, the consensus, I think, is that both of you guys say no, right?
I say no, yeah.
You say no. Archie, you say no. I say yes. And I say yes for the reasons that I stated.
So it says here that the legislature authorizes school districts to spend local revenues.
School districts,
yep.
Plural.
Uh-huh.
School districts to spend local revenues in the amount of 1.4 in excess of the expenditure limitation.
That's school districts,
school
plural.
district.
That's not just one school district. That's all of them. That's around 400 of them in the state.
Who spends the money that is given to the school?
School boards.
The school boards.
That's exactly what happens there. There's no way that you can make a point that's going to be $400 billion.
Jose, I just read the bill to you, and it says each school district can exceed.
Now, if you say to me that this is a poorly written bill, I agree with that, but that is common. We practically every bill that we read is a poorly written bill.
But this isn't, as you were saying, total. This is each individual, which is going to be a lot of money.
And each one of them can exceed their budget by $1.4 billion. Yeah. And there's 400 school districts. That's $400 billion.
Okay. You say $400 billion, I say $1.5 billion.
But we read it to you, and it's school districts. Anyway. Okay. Anyway, I'm against it.
It's poorly written.
I understand politically but I'm totally against this. But going to with yours and about the people in the next election, the representatives, that's part of the problem, is that they don't know how to message. The Republicans don't know how to get out there and message. And if they can't get out there and message, and they can't see if they voted against this bill and why they voted, and they can't articulate that, then guess what? I guess they don't deserve to be in.
Our federal government is in debt $31 trillion,
Yep.
and this is putting the state of Arizona on that same path.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that. This brings to an end this week's edition of Arizona Bill Watch. Thank you for watching. If you like what you saw, please make sure you tell your friends, relatives, and anyone else you know. And make sure you tune in next week for another fantastic edition of Arizona Bill Watch.
Arizona Bill Watch, the show where you get satisfaction if you're not getting it from your state legislators.